Hello, everyone, and welcome to Gruff Talk, where each week we take a deep dive into all the ways we can feel better, look better, live better, and age better. I'm your host, Barbara Hannah Grufferman. Hey, I want to thank you all for tuning in every week, and also want to welcome some new listeners and subscribers to Gruff Talk. A few of our episodes came about because listeners emailed ideas to me, so if you have an idea for an episode, please don't keep it to yourself. Email me at grufftalkpodcast@gmail.com. I am super excited about this episode because it's all about something that we all do 24/7, but don't really think about. Breathing. Yes, breathing. Breathe in, breathe out. My guest today has been studying the act of breathing for many, many years and is hell-bent on making sure the world knows just how important proper breathing is to overall health and wellness, especially as we get older. Functional breathing, the technical term for breathing correctly, can ease anxiety, help you sleep better, bolster your immune system, give you more energy, lessen pain, and so much more. Who knew? I actually didn't know until today when I recorded this episode. Dysfunctional breathing, which is something most of us are doing and which is the wrong way to breathe, is, well, not good. But in a few minutes, you'll learn what to do to take full advantage of the power of proper breathing to age better. Patrick McKeown is one of the world's leading experts on breathing and sleep. Over the last 20 years, he has coached thousands of people to breathe better, improving their health, mental focus, and even sports performance. He's authored a bunch of best-selling books, including The Breathing Cure, which we discussed a lot during our chat. Patrick created his own science-backed breathwork training program called Oxygen Advantage, and all about that will be in the show notes and links, so definitely check it out. And he's trained thousands of breathing instructors all around the world. This really was a fascinating conversation. It's made me a true believer in the power of breathing correctly. And I'm pretty confident that after you listen, you'll be a breathing champion too. I actually called myself a breathing monster. That's what I kind of am now. So tune out everything for a little while, pop in your earbuds, and just breathe.
This episode is brought to you by Smart Water Alkaline. Whether you're running miles or running meetings, elevate how you hydrate with Smart Water Alkaline. It's the hydration that fits perfectly into an active lifestyle and your backpack or hand. It's simple. Rise, grind, alkaline. Elevate how you hydrate and pick up a Smart Water Alkaline today.
Hello, Patrick, and welcome to Gruff Talk.
Thanks very much, Barbara. It's great to be here.
You know, I read your excellent book, The Breathing Cure, and I know this is your second book, but excellent books about breathing. And Danny Dreyer, who is the founder of Chi Running, he was a guest recently on the show, and he highly recommended that I meet with you and read the book. And of course, I'm so happy that both have now been accomplished. I read the book. It's great. And now here you are on the show. So we need to talk about why you think breathing is so essential to a better, healthier life. And, the focus of Gruff Talk is to also age better. And that has a real part in aging better as well. So let's get started. I'd like to read a paragraph from your book. In fact, it's the very first paragraph in The Breathing Cure. And you wrote, "Imagine a breathing technique that can increase uptake and delivery of oxygen to cells, improve blood circulation, and even unblock the nose. Perhaps it can help open the airways of the lungs, enhance blood flow and oxygen delivery to the brain, improve sleep, and bring calmness to the mind. It might even restore bodily functions disturbed by stress, build greater resilience, and help you live longer." You might think this description sounds far-fetched, but it isn't. And then, Patrick, you go on to say that researchers have listed up to 30 common symptoms and conditions in which poor breathing patterns are a factor. Let's start there. So you're making a case that functional breathing, which is what you call proper breathing, is really should be viewed as a key pillar for overall health and wellness, along with like eating well and sleeping well and exercising and the like. Can you talk us through that?
Yes, Barbara. If we think about the autonomic nervous system and individuals who have chronic conditions, such as irritable bowel syndrome, people with diabetes, people with epilepsy, asthma, COPD, etc., they're very often in an increased sympathetic drive. So their body is physiologically in a stress response. And then we have to think, is that the ideal grounds for setting up recovery? So is the body going to heal itself when it's continuously in an increased sympathetic drive? And the connection with breathing is that through the breath, you can help to stimulate the vagus nerve. You can also help to strengthen what's called the baroreflex. And the baroreflex are pressure receptors in the major blood vessels. And they're continuously monitoring your blood pressure. And we need these pressure receptors to be very sensitive to fluctuations in blood pressure. So if our blood pressure rises, the baroreceptors should detect on the increase in our blood pressure and send a message via the brain to the blood vessels to dilate and the heart rate to slow down. And conversely, if our blood pressure drops, these baroreceptors should pick up on this and send a message via the brain to the blood vessels to constrict and the heart rate to increase to normalize blood pressure. Our breathing is going to influence the sensitivity of the baroreflex. There's a direct connection. Scientifically, it would be the chemoreflex. Now, what does that mean? This is where breathing is a little bit more complicated than just saying, take a deep breath. When we take a breath, our breathing is driven by the gas carbon dioxide. It's not driven by oxygen. So if you think that we're breathing away now and you're thinking, well, what's driving that? Well, what's happening is the carbon dioxide is increasing in the blood pH is dropping, and the brain is sending a signal to the diaphragm and to the intercostal muscles. And basically, the volume of the chest increases and air comes into the lungs. How sensitive we are to carbon dioxide is inversely relation to the sensitivity of the baroreflex. So I'll put it this way. An individual with, say, for example, panic disorder and anxiety, 75% of that population have dysfunctional breathing. Their breathing is faster, their breathing is harder, their breathing is often upper chest, and they often feel air hunger. That would imply that they have a strong chemosensitivity to carbon dioxide, that they have a strong stimulus to breathe, and what's driving their breathing and then is their breathing is too fast. But if you have a strong sensitivity to carbon dioxide, you've got a reduced sensitivity of the baroreflex, you're in that increased stress response. So we target breathing to help reduce the chemosensitivity to carbon dioxide. We can do that with light breathing. We can do it with slow breathing. We do it with nose breathing. And this helps to bring balance to the autonomic nervous system. And that's what we should be striving for. Now, another aspect of this is the relationship between our breathing and sleep. It's very common to have sleep disorder breathing. It affects between 25 to 50% of men. And post-menopause women, it's increasing to about between 20 to 30%. If we have obstructive sleep apnea or upper airway resistance syndrome, in other words, there's a resistance to our breathing during sleep that we may stop breathing for a period of time, or there's a reduction in the flow of our breathing for a period of time to cause a lowering of our blood oxygen saturation. All of these factors contribute to arousal from sleep or sleep fragmentation. Mm-hmm. And that again is disrupting the autonomic nervous system. Now, if we improve breathing patterns during wakefulness, we improve our breathing during sleep.
So it's a practice. So what you're suggesting is we have to really start to practice how to breathe properly, or what you call functional breathing.
It's understanding it, and it's a typically functional breathing is coined by researchers in the field. Mm-hmm. So they'll either say that your breathing is functional or dysfunctional. Now, one paper from a professor of physical therapy from I think it's Evansville University in the United States, you can determine if you have functional breathing or dysfunctional breathing by the length of your BOLT score.
I'm going to stop you right there.
Sure.
What is the BOLT, B-O-L-T score? What is it? What does it stand for? And how do you get your BOLT score? How does this work?
Yeah. I use the phrase BOLT because it stands for Body Oxygen Level Test. And I thought it would be memorable for people.
Mm-hmm, it is.
It's a measurement that you take. You're sitting down, you allow your breathing to recover. And then you take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and you pinch your nose and hold your nose, and you time how many seconds does it take until you feel the first definite desire to breathe or the first involuntary movement of your breathing muscles. And when you let go, your breathing should be normal. In other words, it's not the maximum length of breath hold time. It's a comfortable breath hold time.
So just to be clear, so you're not asking people to hold their breath, pinch their nose, hold their breath until they're feeling that they're going to start gasping for air. It's a comfort thing. Am I right?
It's a comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very important that when you resume breathing, that your breathing is fairly close to what it was before you started the exercise.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, and sometimes people may be a little bit shocked with their result, but Kyle Kiesel's paper shows that if your Bolt score is greater than 25 seconds, there is an 89% chance that your breathing is functional. Now, that also implies that if your Bolt score is less than 25 seconds, it implies that your breathing is dysfunctional.
Have you found in your research and studying other people's research that there's a correlation between a good Bolt score, meaning good functional breathing ability, and cardio fitness? For example, someone who, exercises regularly, is a runner perhaps. Is there a correlation?
Not always, no.
Not always. Interesting.
Yeah, because your breathing is different. How you breathe during physical exercise is going to be influenced by how you breathe during rest.
Oh, I see. Okay, I want to stop right there, and I want to say something back to you to make sure I'm clear so everyone listening is clear on this as well. What you're saying is, so practice correct breathing, proper breathing techniques during normal life, and then all these other parts of your life, exercising, sleeping, fill in the blank, will follow.
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
How do you feel most people breathe? Meaning, are most people breathing dysfunctionally? And of course, how would you like to see more people breathe? And in your book, a well-known personal trainer who has written many books on exercise, his name is Tim Anderson, wrote the following passage. I like to tell people that breathing properly, nasal breathing with your tongue on the roof of your mouth, filling your lungs up from the bottom to the top, meaning not chest, right, gives you a center of strength. It makes the body and mind strong and resilient. This, I believe, is really what functional breathing is, right? So can you expand on that and also talk us through your concept of dysfunctional breathing? I mean, I guess it all goes back to the Bolt score, right? I mean, if you're breathing dysfunctionally, that will be clear in your Bolt score?
People with dysfunctional breathing have a lower Bolt score. Mm-hmm. So say, for example, if a person exhales, holds their breath, and they hold their breath for up to 15 seconds, this implies that their breathing is faster, harder, upper chest, and irregular. Mm-hmm. It's going to vary person to person. The best way to think about dysfunctional breathing is to think about how do you breathe when you get into a difficult situation. So we all know when we get into a difficult situation.
Like if you start to hyperventilate, breathe heavily, quickly.
Yes. But it's not even that it can be noticeable. It's not. Sometimes people feel that they have to be hyperventilating and taking these and going into a panic attack. That's not the way it is. Most of us don't go into a panic attack. Like a child who's sitting outside an exam hall, ready to go in to do an exam, they may start sighing more. They may start breathing a little bit faster in upper chest. To the outside observer, it's almost as if nothing is happening. But yet that change in their breathing pattern is going to feed into their anxiety. Then we have to ask the question, well, what about people who breathe like that all the time? Mm-hmm. And as I said earlier on, 75% of the group of people with anxiety and panic disorder population breathe like that all the time. It's feeding into their anxiety. And it's about 30% of the main population. It's 50% of people with lower back pain.
Oh, can we stop right there? Because I do have lower back pain. Let's talk a little bit about that. What is the connection? In other words, how can breathing properly actually physically impact whether you have pain in your lower back or elsewhere or not?
So your diaphragm breathing muscle, which is the main breathing muscle, and it separates your thorax from your abdomen. Mm-hmm. That's responsible not just for respiration, but it also provides stability to the spine. Now, when we breathe through our mouth, we typically engage more of the upper chest, and some people have a habit of breathing higher than lower. If they are breathing high in the upper chest, it reduces what's called the zone of apposition. And this in turn affects intra-abdominal pressure. And this in turn then is affecting the stability of the spine. So breathing and movement go together. And if breathing is dysfunctional, movement is dysfunctional. Now, a good place to start with this is to breathe in and out through your nose, because when you breathe through your nose, you typically have a better recruitment of the diaphragm. And it's very easy to test this. I always say to my students, look down at your chest, take the breath through your mouth, And when you breathe through your mouth, what part of the body do you see move? Typically, you will see that mouth breathing is engaging the upper chest.
Right.
So you think about somebody doing physical exercise, they're breathing mouth, they're breathing fast, they're breathing high. But the greatest concentration of blood flow in the lungs is in the lower lobes. And also, we need the diaphragm breathing muscle to support us during movement. Now, mouth breathing is also reducing oxygen transfer from the lungs into the blood and oxygen delivery from the blood to the working tissues and organs. Mouth breathing is irritating the upper airways, drying out the airways. This can cause bronchoconstriction. Mouth breathing can lead to a stuffy nose, and mouth breathing can lead to poor dental health, forward head posture, but also an increased stress response. Now, you think about walking. Why aren't we walking with our mouth closed? But why don't we do gentle physical exercise with the mouth closed, breathing in and out through the nose? None of this, Barbara, is rocket science. None of this is new. You know, even looking back, 1988, researchers found that when you breathe continuously through your nose, the partial pressure of oxygen in the blood increases by nearly 10%. When you do physical exercise with your mouth closed, carbon dioxide increases in your blood. And carbon dioxide is not just this waste gas that people talk about. Because as carbon dioxide increases in your blood vessels dilate, and red blood cells release oxygen more readily to the tissues and organs. So there's an idea out there that I really want to lay to rest, because it's probably the biggest myth that has ever crept into breathing and health. And that's the myth: take a full big breath. The problem with taking a full big breath is that the more air you breathe, the more carbon dioxide you blow off from the lungs. And this in turn reduces carbon dioxide in the blood. And this in turn causes your blood vessels to constrict. And it also causes less oxygen to be released throughout the body. So the harder and the faster you breathe relative to your body needs, the less oxygen that's being delivered. Now, if, for example, then you have a person that's in a habit of breathing a little bit faster and harder throughout the day, that person is going to be in an increased stress response, but they're likely to have cold hands and cold feet. They very often experience brain fog. They can have insomnia at night because of overstimulation physiologically of the mind. Because when you breathe faster during sleep, your brain interprets that the body is under threat. The brain is here to protect us. So during sleep is all about rest and digest. During rest, our breathing should be soft, in through the nose, out through the nose, with a slow and relaxed exhalation. The length of the exhalation should be about 1.5 times the inhalation. Our breathing during rest should be silent. But if we have a low Bolt score, our breathing is faster and harder. The brain interprets that the body is under threat, and the brain, in turn, can put us into a fight or flight response. So we as human beings, we have an ability to self-regulate. And it's our everyday breathing, by tuning into it and going beyond what you hear about breathing, because there's a lot of misinformation out there about breathing. It's not good to be taking full big breaths.
So really, it's not good. And I read this in your wonderful book, The Breathing Cure. Taking those full, deep breaths is really not the goal here. Explain that. How would you do that? Is there a time, like, what did you say, like 2 seconds in, 3 seconds out? Talk to us about that. I read somewhere in your book, too, that the ideal is 6 breaths, in and out, 6 breaths per minute.
So I'll start off with, say, for example, so we use about 26 different breathing exercises. Mm-hmm. And a very simple exercise that we start off with is simply putting one hand on the chest, one hand just above the navel, tuning into your breathing and really slowing down the speed of the inhalation, almost that your breathing is almost imperceptible coming in through the nose, and then a really relaxed and a slow and a gentle breath out. And the whole purpose of this breathing exercise is actually to breathe less air, to the point that you feel air hunger. So you're taking a really soft breath in and a really relaxed and slow, gentle breath out, and to breathe less air to the point that you feel that you would like to take in a deeper breath. This signifies that carbon dioxide is increased in the blood. And by doing this exercise, you improve your blood circulation and oxygen delivery, but you also help to stimulate the vagus nerve. It's a down regulator. So we think of this vagus nerve that's wandering throughout the human body, innervating the major organs. 80 to 90% of the communication is from the body up to the brain. We slow down the speed of the exhalation. The body is telling the brain that the body is safe. This is really, really vital in terms of down regulation. It's not about taking the deep breath that very often you hear. It's about taking a very soft, gentle breath in, and it's really the speed of the exhalation. Whenever you have a slow and relaxed and gentle exhalation, the body is telling the brain that everything is okay. But it should be in and out through the nose. Now, one way to know if you're activating a relaxation response is check for the saliva in the mouth. When we get stressed, the mouth goes dry. When we go into relaxation, there's increased watery saliva in the mouth. And if one just sitting at home, practicing slowing down their breathing to the point of a tolerable air hunger for about 3 or 4 minutes, pay attention to whether the saliva in the mouth is increased.
Oh, that's a very interesting
sleepy.
Test.
So that would be, one exercise we do. So that's from a biochemical dimension. Now, probably the best breathing exercise possible is to go for a walk with your mouth closed. Simple as that. Because any physical exercise you do, breathing in and out through your nose. As you do physical exercise, your body produces more carbon dioxide. Keeping your mouth closed allows carbon dioxide to increase in the blood. And exposing your body to increased carbon dioxide helps to reduce the sensitivity of carbon dioxide. And this in turn then will help change your breathing pattern, that your breathing is slower and lighter. It's all about breathing efficiency. It's about teaching the body to do more with less. I suppose, Barbara, think of somebody coming into your studio or somebody that you're meeting, and they're sitting down beside you, and you're looking at their breathing, and you just notice their breathing. It's faster. You see a lot of movement. They're sighing. You're not going to say that that person is in the best state of health. At the very least, you're going to say that they are uncomfortable. So our breathing can give telltale signs. A person who is breathing more air, it's not a great sign, and it's often a habit. And it can be a habit as a result of stress in their life or trauma.
Mm-hmm.
But what is that breathing more air actually doing to the body? It's causing our blood circulation to narrow. So 50,000 miles of blood vessels throughout the body. We are impairing our blood circulation by breathing too hard and too fast. Now, you might say, or somebody might say, well, how should I breathe during physical exercise? It's all relative. But keep your mouth closed during physical exercise, especially as we get older. But I would also say it even for younger people. It's so important. If you want to get the most out of your exercise, keep your mouth closed.
Keep your mouth closed. I am a runner, and in fact, I'm training for yet another race. I'm doing 3 marathons in 2023 and a bunch of halves and blah, blah, blahs. And as I mentioned before, I did have Danny Dreyer, founder of Chi Running, on the show, and who is convinced that with his program, the proper breathing is essential. And following his program and his recommendations for breathing, and then, following up with reading your book, I'm trying very, very hard to do that as I'm running, especially when I'm racing, to breathe through my diaphragm and to really put this all into practice. It isn't easy. It's easier in regular life when you're sitting there quietly or going about your regular business to really focus on this. But do you have any tips for people like me who do serious running or other forms of extended exercise where you can get out of breath more easily? Any tips?
We would always start off with, how do you breathe during rest?
Mm-hmm.
How do you breathe during light physical exercise? So say, for example, a very simple tool would be to stand up and just to put one hand either side of your lower ribs. And as you breathe in, you're feeling the ribs are gently moving out. And as you breathe out, you're feeling that your ribs are gently moving in. You don't have to be taking full big breaths to engage the diaphragm. So a deep breath actually means that you've got good recruitment of the diaphragm. Mm-hmm. So you think then in terms of the human lungs, this is where the blood circulation is. This is where the blood flow is. So we do want to breathe low with good recruitment of the diaphragm, but start off during rest, because literally during physical exercise, our breathing is going to be influenced by how we are breathing in our everyday.
As you said before, I mean, that really is the biggest message here.
And I would start off just with walking, Mm-hmm. So walking, breathing in and out through your nose. And you're much better off taking fuller breaths but less of them in terms of to improve breathing efficiency or alveolar ventilation. I put it this way. If you breathe fast and shallow, much of the air that you take into your body is not reaching the small air sacs in the lungs.
Mm-hmm.
So there could be, in some instances, 50% of the air taken into the body, if you are breathing fast and shallow, is not getting down to the alveoli. So is there a way to improve that? And the answer would be to breathe nose, to breathe low, and to breathe slow. But it's not about breathing low to the point that you're taking these full big breaths to the point that you're over breathing. It's about breathing low, but also having a balance in terms of your breathing volume.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to overdo it either. So go for a walk first with your mouth closed, bringing your attention out of your mind onto your breathing, and gently softening your breathing as you're walking so that you're only taking in enough air that what you actually feel. And then after a walk, just increase the pace of your walk and then go into a light jog. Can you do a light jog then with your mouth closed, breathing in and out through the nose? In other words, dip your toe into the water. You're not going to know what you're able to achieve until you actually do it, but you can get a couple of ideas. Number one, if your bolt score is low, you're not going to be able to run with your mouth closed because the degree of air hunger is too much. Number two, if one has a really well-developed nasal airway, it's easier to do physical exercise with the mouth closed. But we have to bear this in mind. It's trainable. So the more we do our physical exercise with the mouth closed, our body adapts to that. And initially when we do physical exercise with the mouth closed, the degree of air hunger is stronger. This is because carbon dioxide is accumulated in the blood. And remember at the very start, we were saying our breathing volume, and I'm talking about the respiratory rate multiplied by tidal volume. So the volume of air that we breathe in is influenced by our chemosensitivity to carbon dioxide. But by doing physical exercise with the mouth closed, we're exposing our body to increased carbon dioxide, and this in turn reduces our chemosensitivity to carbon dioxide so that we learn to do physical exercise with less ventilation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's an economical saving here. I'll give you an example. Professor George Dallam, he's from Colorado State University. He got 10 recreational athletes. He had them breathe exclusively in and out through their nose for 6 months. At 6 months, then he tested, during a graded exercise test, their exercise capabilities with nasal breathing, but also with mouth breathing. He found with nose breathing that the fraction of expired oxygen was less, meaning that the body utilized oxygen better. He also found that the respiratory rate was less, 39 breaths per minute with nose breathing versus 49 breaths per minute with mouth breathing. But also ventilation was less. The individuals doing their physical exercise with the mouth closed required 22% less ventilation.
Wow.
Now, that's quite a saving because we have to consider that there's a cost associated with breathing. And very often it's our breathing that sets the limits. You know, the diaphragm muscle, if it gets tired, blood is stolen from the legs to feed the diaphragm. So exercise has to pretty much slow down or cease. But also the degree of ventilation, the feeling of discomfort, that's also influenced by, of course, how hard and fast are we breathing during exercise. So anybody who's starting off, I would say to you, start breathing through your nose during sleep. It's tremendous for your recovery. It's tremendous for waking up feeling more refreshed in the morning. And then during the day, be conscious of having your mouth closed. If you get into a difficult situation, focus on slowing down the speed of the exhalation. People won't even know that you're doing it. Start off with small things. Something is not going quite right. Bring your attention into the body and slow down the speed of the exhalation. Your body is telling the brain that things are okay. Down regulation before sleep. If you have insomnia, etc., you're overstimulated, you find it difficult to fall asleep, bring your attention onto your breathing and really slow down the speed of the inhalation and exhalation to the point of air hunger. During your physical exercise, nose breathe, soften your breathing, and even focus on gently slowing down your breath. Now, of course, one is going to say, well, when I do physical exercise, my breathing is faster and harder. Yes, but what I mean by that is relative to what you normally do, bring a feeling of slowness so that it's a little bit slower than what you would normally do. And also it's a little bit lighter. And, you know, not to be breathing through the mouth, which is fast breathing and shallow breathing, reduce recruitment of the diaphragm, and reduce oxygen uptake and delivery to the working muscles. It just doesn't make sense to mouth breathe during physical exercise. Doesn't make sense.
You know, this is also going a little bit against some of the advice that I've heard over the years about, yes, breathing when you're running, breathing in through your nose, but breathing out through your mouth has been, I've read for years and years and years. So I have been doing breathing in and breathing out only through my nose since Danny Dreyer's been on and since I read your book, for sure. And so it is a practice, as Danny pointed out. And as you are pointing out, it's a practice. It's something you have to keep practicing and be very focused on. And so just a little anecdote and a very recent one. While I was reading your book, and this was about 2 weeks ago, I happened to be on an airplane and we went through some really bad turbulence. And of course, my heart rate, and I can check my heart rate on my Apple Watch, it was kind of going up. I felt my breathing was getting a little quicker. And I was more than halfway through your book, and I actually started to use your advice. And I slowed down my breathing. I didn't take the deep breaths. I really did everything that you're suggesting in the book, and it actually worked. And it was an experiment for me. And I said, well, when we have this conversation on the show, I'm going to bring this up, that it really worked for me to bring my heart rate down and to just calm my head down. And clearly it was all telling my brain that everything was going to be okay, as you pointed out before. So it really did work to ease my anxiety about that terrible turbulence. It was really pretty amazing. And I just also wanted to talk a little bit more about sleep. You did mention that keeping your mouth closed during sleep is a really good idea because that will force you to breathe through your nose. And again, it'll continue with this practice that we all need to do. Well, that's not so easy, kind of easier said than done, right? You do recommend taping your mouth. And for those of you who are watching us, Patrick is now going to demonstrate. Can you show us the tape that you? And I think
so taping of the mouth, Barbara.
Yeah.
It's not all that bad, I started taping my mouth back in 1998, and it was the best thing I ever did in terms of my sleep. Now, at that time, I was using paper tape that I would get in a drugstore.
Right.
And over time, then we brought out our own tape, and because it's myotape, it was developed for myofunctional therapy. So we stretched the tape. It's a cotton-based tape. And we stretch it that surrounds the lips, and we press it. And even with a beard, well, this variation here works with a beard.
For those of you who can't see, who are listening and not watching, Patrick is great. It's a little square with a little square, like a hole in the middle. So I see Patrick's lips, but it's clear. So, you're able to, your lips. But it keeps your lips together is the point. So it will help you to practice breathing through your nose when you're sleeping, or even during the course of the day, quite frankly, if you're having an issue with, doing that. Right, Patrick?
Yes. And if anybody looks at the literature, even going into PubMed, which is a library of medical and scientific papers.
I look at it all day long.
Put in mouth breathing or oral breathing, and you'll find about 700 papers. You will find hardly any paper that will say that mouth breathing is beneficial. That when mouth breathing is studied when it comes to sleep, if you're waking up with a dry mouth, your sleep quality is reduced. You're more prone to insomnia, snoring, obstructive sleep apnea. Even wearing a mandibular advancement device, a new paper came out that when you have your mouth taped, it improves the efficacy of it. If one is wearing a CPAP machine, it's very important also to breathe in and out through the nose. So we have to think that when the mouth is open, it's a trauma to the upper airways, but it's resulting in a lighter sleep. Now we think about the conditions associated with poor sleep. Again, our breathing during the day is going to influence our breathing during sleep, but getting the mouth closed with the tongue resting up in the roof of the mouth, because this airway here, a good airway is about the size.
Neck, little bit, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so our throat itself is about the size of our thumb. So we don't have much room for error. And if we have the mouth open, the lower jaw, which is the mandible, is going backwards. But also with the mouth open, we cannot have the tongue resting in the roof of the mouth. And this compromises the size of the airway, the diameter of the airway, which increases the resistance to breathing. So it's been quite understudied, but in the few small studies that have been published, the AHI, which would be a measurement of sleep apnea severity, reduces by 33% in people with mild to moderate sleep apnea. Now, I wrote a paper again, it's online, and you'll find that it was written, co-authored with 2 ear, nose and throat doctors, looking at how your breathing during wakefulness is influencing your sleep apnea and the phenotypes of sleep apnea. And I think it's worth always talking about sleep apnea because it's a condition that increases as we get older. And postmenopausal women, it's affecting probably about up to 30%.
Mm-hmm.
It very much influences autonomic regulation, that if we have obstructive sleep apnea, it puts us into that increased stress response, that increased sympathetic drive that I was speaking about. There's very little research, but the small research that's there shows that there's an association between hot flushes and obstructive sleep apnea. So again, we have to think about regulation of the autonomic nervous system. Can we really have a balance in the autonomic nervous system if we're having sleep disorder breathing? It's going to drive down our heart rate variability, and it's going to increase our stress response. And it's not ideal. It's not ideal in our everyday life, but long term, it's not ideal either.
No, it definitely will not help us to age better, which really is the focus of the show. I have a question about meditation. I mean, this is a form of meditation, but you haven't used that word. I mean, do you meditate, or do you feel that your practice of breathing is in fact meditation? And interestingly enough, just this morning at 5 a.m., as I was getting ready to, because of our time difference, to talk with you today, I was reading a study in a running email that I get, a newsletter, about how hundreds of runners, it was a pretty substantial number of people who were studied, and half of the group meditated and half of the group just did breathing, and they had a different name for it. I think it was
cyclic breathing.
Thank you. Yes. And those who did the cyclical breathing fared much better than those who did just meditation.
Yeah, I think that paper you refer to, I think it was co-authored by Dr. Andrew Huberman, who's a Stanford researcher. I think he's a neuroscientist.
That's correct. And he has a great podcast too.
Meditation is like for me, what is meditation? But simply bringing focused attention to what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be onto the breath, and it's helping to bring a stillness to the mind, or it could be bringing my attention into the body, which in turn is helping to take my attention out of the mind, or into present moment awareness, that even as we have this conversation, that I'm not lost in thought, that I'm directly here. And it's a wonderful thing to do. It can be challenging for the person who needs it the most, for a person with anxiety, for a person with racing mind. And they'll often get frustrated. And I say that because I've worked with a lot of people with panic disorder and anxiety over the years. And I can't help but thinking, between 2010 and 2013, I worked with about 3,000 individuals. And I asked every single one of them if they meditated in the past and how many of those are now meditating. And there was a huge fall off. And then I was putting myself into their situation, and I was just thinking to myself, if my mind was racing and I had an inability to switch off, am I genuinely going to, to stick with meditation when I find it most challenging? So I was teaching them functional breathing, because the way I look at it is, somebody comes in with anxiety and panic disorder, their autonomic nervous system is all over the place, is taxed. They're in that increased sympathetic drive. Their sleep is off. Let's help bring balance. So we use small breath holds. We use light, soft, slow breathing, tailored according to the individual, because sometimes the feeling of air hunger, it can put them into a fight or flight response. So it has to be tailored.
Yes.
Walking with the mouth closed, sleeping, down regulating before sleep, but also taping them out during sleep. Now, people with anxiety, they will find it difficult to use a paper tape. They're better off using something like the myotape, that is surrounding the lips and they feel more comfortable with it. Let's get the autonomic nervous system right first and bring balance, and then bring in awareness. So I feel, of course, there's a role for meditation, but I also feel there's a tremendous role for changing your physiology. Now, Dr. Andy Huberman's paper there, they looked at 3 different breathing techniques. One was the physiological sigh, and the physiological sigh is when you're taking a full breath in. So it is actually a full breath in, stop, and then a full breath in, but a really slow exhalation. Always think about the exhalation. And it's the speed of the exhalation that's helping to evoke relaxation. The cyclical breathing is actually a stressor, hyperventilation, and a breath hold after an exhalation. Mm-hmm. And if they do 2 cycles, it's hyperventilation. I'm not sure. I can't remember the third one. Was it 5, 7, 8, breathing in for 5, holding for 7, breathing out for 8?
Yeah, I think it was. Mm-hmm.
So that would be slow breathing. breathing techniques have its purpose once an individual understands what is the breathing technique doing. And we also have to bear in mind that breathing techniques, not the same exercises for everybody. If I have somebody coming in with anxiety and panic disorder, I use a different technique with that group to an athlete, to somebody with sleep disorder breathing, to somebody with asthma. And it's the same as physical exercise, Somebody goes into a gym. Some people are training this, that, and the other. And with breathing, we have to do that as well, because it's bringing our attention onto our breath. Be patient with it. But I would also say is dip your toe gently into the water. And one breathing technique that has really caught the Western imagination is hyperventilation along breath holds. It's a stressor. But for me, that would be equivalent to doing a sprint. Don't start off with an extreme breathing technique. Start off with something very gentle. Listen to your body and gear up when you feel that the time is right for you. But get the benefits of it. And it's coming back to the absolute basics here. Breathing in and out through the nose, softening the speed of your breathing, slowing down the speed of the exhalation during rest, down-regulating before sleep, physical exercise with the mouth closed. If the air hunger gets too much during physical exercise, just slow down a little bit. Be patient with it. Your recovery will be much faster post-physical exercise with nose breathing versus mouth breathing.
I recommend that everyone read your book, The Breathing Cure, but also check out your website. And we'll have the links to everything in the show notes and on my website as well. But your website is Oxygen Advantage, and there's a lot of really good information there. But you're right, this is not a one thing fits everybody approach to proper breathing. So I think everyone needs to really see what works for them. But I think the best way to do that is to get more information about how to do it. You gave us a lot of information today, and this was so much fun. And I hope that you'll come back on the show and talk with us again. What's the most important takeaway you want everyone to remember from our conversation today? I mean, there's so much. And in fact, you just listed a bunch, but add something to it if you want.
We're coming out with a new app, and it's going to be released hopefully within a couple of weeks. So we're looking at February of 2023. I've just put in about 12 months of work. We've invested a lot of money into it, and the app contains pretty much everything, the entire program. And we're launching the app for free, no subscription.
Oh, that's great.
It kind of brings me back 20 years ago. I was feeling there was a lot of resistance to breathing. People weren't quite getting it. And that was when I wrote my first book. And by writing a book, it was published for asthma, published internationally. It got the information into the hands of the public. Now we're moving with technology. And the app is also going to bring breathing into the hands of the public. Now, the purpose of the app is that no matter where you're coming from, if you're coming with PTSD, you put that into and you get a daily plan specific for you, or for sleep, or for athletic performance, or women's breathing. So maybe just to put that out there, because we don't have a financial motive in it, my quest now is really, how do we get breathing into the hands of the people? It should be there. It was seen very much left of field for too many years. For decades, it was really seen left of field. There's nothing left to feel about breathing. There's nothing left to feel, Barbara, about the ability we as human beings to regulate our states. Things happen. Even if I was to say, what's the biggest thing it has brought to my life? My ability to bring a quietness to the mind, my ability to bring a softness to my life, and also my ability to experience life. And it's by regulating physiology. I have a history of dysfunctional breathing. As many people who go into this field, we go into this field originally not to make a career out of it. Our drive was because we had terrible breathing. And I was a kid in school. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't focus. I abandoned school altogether at 14 years of age, never to go back. I did go back a year later. I was a child that I just couldn't cope with the educational system. I couldn't sit there for 6 hours having to pay attention to what my teacher was saying, with my attention stuck in my head, but not having the energy to cope with what the teacher was saying. I had sleep disorder breathing. Up to 15% of studied children have sleep disorder breathing. 15%.
Incredible.
We are medicating these kids with Ritalin. These children, the problem is sleep. Very often, I'm not going to say it's an absolute cure-all, but look at the studies and look at the studies that are published in the journal Pediatrics. Like, I'll give you one study. Karen Bonnock, who I believe is an American researcher, she looked at 11,000 children in Stratford-upon-Avon, the home of Shakespeare. over a number of years, and she looked at these children who were snoring and having apneas and mouth breathing at age 5. In other words, sleep disorder breathing. If untreated at age 5, they had a 40% increased risk of special education needs by age 8. Now, in that same paper, which I can email on to you if you like,
yes, please.
She talks about 3 million children in the United States, aged between 6 and 21 years of age, having mental health problems associated with sleep disorders. Now, why aren't we teaching children not just about the quantity of sleep, but the quality of sleep, but also why aren't we teaching adults? See, there's nothing commercial about breathing. It's very difficult to scale it. It's difficult to make money from it, but that shouldn't be the primary motive. The motive is to give tools to people that they have for the rest of their life, a simple understanding. And it has taken far too long to get this information out there. Now there's a quest and people are starting to begin to understand it. James Nestor, he's a San Francisco-based writer. He wrote a tremendous book called Breath. That's New York Times bestseller. You know, there's other things that are happening. Wim Hof, in fairness, has done great work in publicly putting out breathing.
Yes.
And that's where we want to get it. It's all about getting breathing into the hands of the people. So I would say to people, start off gently.
We thank you so much for all the work that you're doing on behalf of our collective health and well-being. Thank you for that. You know, this whole concept of breathing, even though I started running 15 years ago, really is only something I recently started to focus on, thanks to people like you and Danny Dreyer.
Researchers are starting to catch up, Barbara. If you just go into Google and put in breath tools running, a group of researchers from a university in Austria have wrote a pretty detailed scientific article. So once you start to see the researchers getting into it, you know what's going to happen. And, you know, just as I think it was Mr. Fix that started running back in the 70s and they all thought he was crazy. Well, nasal breathing, they may think we're mad now. Give it 10 or 15 years. Just before we close, there's one doctor. His name is Dr. William Hang, and he's an orthodontist based in Agoura Hills, California. And I gave a small presentation to a study club in LA back 15 years ago, and he was a marathon runner. And he has ran many, many marathons with his mouth closed. And I wrote about him in the book, The Oxygen Advantage. So I actually do have a book specifically for runners. And I don't know what age Dr. Hang is now, but he must be in his 70s. And he is still running marathons, but he's running them with his mouth closed.
Yeah, well, that is my goal too. I mean, I am putting this into practice. And one thing I just want to point out, as you were talking before about meditation and what's the difference. But in my mind, meditation is something, you know, and this is maybe a very limited view of it, something you sit down and you do, almost like working out. There's a designated amount of time. You go and you sit down and you do it. Whereas this is a 24/7 approach to how you're living your life. It's a very different thing. And the effects on your body and your mind are similar or better than having a meditation practice. That's not to say that you can't do both. They're not mutually exclusive, but that is the difference. This is a practice that you do all day long and at night as you sleep. Really important that you do it at night when you sleep. And that to me is the difference. And with regards to having a meditation practice, look, there are only so many hours in a day. And being a runner, it takes up time, and you do strength training, resistance training as well, if you want to be a really good runner. And, you know, there's only limited time. And so I feel that when I'm doing a lot of those things, I try to incorporate some of the practices that you've been talking about, that Danny Dreyer talks about. And to me, it is my meditation. So I just wanted to point that out too.
I think you've absolutely nailed it. This is what it's about, you know, make your run a meditation.
Yeah.
You know, how many people go for a run?
Yes, I've written about that. It's a how to meditate as you're running. You get into that state, but you have to get yourself there. If your mind is all over the place, you're not going to get there. But if you use breathing is absolutely at the core. And I never realized that until I started to really focus on it, thanks to you and others in your field. But it's really incredible. And I am just so happy that we had this conversation today. I'm so grateful to Danny Dreyer. I will send him an email later. for alerting me that, yeah, you should have him on the show. Absolutely. And this has been an incredible conversation. And I know that the Gruff Talk listeners have learned a great deal from you today, for sure. And I would love to have you come back. We will keep an eye out for that app. I'll stay in touch with you so that I can, kind of share the word. As soon as it comes out, I'd love to let everybody know about it. And again, all of your books, highly recommended. Thank you so much,
It's a pleasure.
Patrick. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Barbara.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode of Gruff Talk, please do 2 things. First, share it with all your friends and family, and subscribe to Gruff Talk wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube, so you never miss a single episode. Until next time, remember this: we can't control getting older, but we can control how we do it. Talk to you soon. Age Better Podcast is a proud member of the Sound Advice Network. Sound Advice, women's voices amplified.